When I was 12 or 13, I would go help my uncle at Pizza Hut, where he was a manager. Since I would always stay until closing with him, it would be very dull and the occasional customer would come in. Since delivery hours were over, it was just me, my uncle, and this guy named John. John was always fun and would always tell jokes to keep it kinda lively. But he left around half an hour before my uncle locked up. There was about 6 homeless people who would hang out in the parking lot of the neighboring restaurant along John Silver's, and most nights I would take them any leftover pizza from the buffet and then return to go play in the parking lot until my uncle set the alarm and came out. So yeah, I was dumb for playing outside by myself, since he was busy and the homeless people would leave shortly after I took them pizza. And thinking about it, what happened this night could have been bad. So this particular night, I guess it was about 11:47, and there was hardly any lights at all. I was just playing with a giant bouncy ball. My uncle was inside, most likely signing papers and making sure the safe was alright, taking the money that had to be taken to the bank and stuff like that. So I had no supervision. This kind of red minivan with tinted windows pulled into the LJS parking lot and stopped parallel to the Pizza Hut doors, and this dude rolled down the passenger window and called for me. I felt weird about it, but figured he was asking for directions, asking if the store was still open, or something of that sort. "What's your name?" he asked, and kinda creeped out. I said, "John." "Come here, I have to ask you something," he said. "No." I gave the excuse of, "I can't, I'll trip over something," but the guy persisted. I finally got tired of it and yelled, "You better go before I call the cops," and ran inside, locking the door and running to the back where my uncle was standing and asking what the yelling was about. A few minutes later, we went to see if he was still there, and luckily he wasn't. So my uncle walked me to his car, pulled up beside the doors, ran in, locked up, and we hauled ass to the bank and then home. After that, I stopped going to work with him and have seen the van around town. Hopefully, the man doesn't recognize me anymore. If you are reading this, let's not ever meet again. Hi, this is my first post. I decided to share my own experience after reading some of yours. I'll start with my background. I'm a female, and I was around 11 years old when this event happened. I was entirely too confident with the small town I lived in. I never even thought that I would be in potential danger, regardless of how many times my parents warned me of it. Okay, now that I have that out of the way, here is my story. I had 2 of my closest friends over. We are all the same age. I will call them Mac and Anna. Anyways, they came to my house. We watched movies and such. It was a pretty typical day, and we enjoyed one another's company like we usually did. That evening, my mom informed us that she was going to call and order pizza from our local Pizza Hut. With all of us being pizza lovers, we were pretty excited about it. She called and ordered it. We hopped in the car with her, and off to Pizza Hut we went. Upon arriving at Pizza Hut, my friends and I decided to run inside and pick up the pizza while my mom stayed outside in the car. She gave me some money, and my friends and I made our way inside. There was an older couple by the register waiting for their food, so we stayed close by the entrance awaiting our turn. A moment later, a man wearing a plaid jacket entered the doors behind us. He quickly disappeared inside the restaurant, and another man came in soon after. He stuck around beside us. He appeared to be in his mid-30s or 40s. He had a scruffy black beard, and his eyes were bloodshot. I assumed he was only waiting in line for pizza, just like we were. Nothing seemed too off about him. We stood there in silence for a moment. I noticed he was sort of glancing at each of us for a second, but I didn't think much of it. Besides, my friends didn't seem to notice. I brushed it off and continued to wait in line. He eventually pulled a flip phone out of his pocket, and it slipped through his fingers, dropping to the floor. My friend Anna stepped forward and picked up his cell phone for him. His battery had become detached, landing on the floor, so she walked in front of him and bent over to get it. I noticed, while she was bending over, that he was staring right at her bottom, and he licked his lips in a seriously creepy way. He said thank you after she gave him his items. The awkward silence returned for a while. This time, his eyes stayed glued on me. It was making me very uncomfortable, so I tried my best to pretend like I didn't notice. The man in the plaid jacket came back and exited the door, not paying attention to us. The strange man began to follow him, but came to a halt, turned to me and touched my chest very quickly and very inappropriately. He said, "Call me," and winked before proceeding out the door. My friends and I had been the only witnesses. In a rush, we got our pizza, paid, and rushed out the door. My mom was parked close by the doors, so we sprinted to her car in a panic and explained what was going on. Luckily, he was still standing outside. He was in the process of getting into the passenger seat of the plaid jacket dude's car when we pointed him out. My mom was able to get his tag number before they sped away, but it was never reported to the authorities. I took it as a life lesson. Even though I'm from a small town, this terrifying event taught me that no matter where you're from, there are deranged people everywhere. 6 years later, that is the event that taught me to be more cautious of strangers. I really hate to think of what would happen to my friends and I had been alone in a less public area. So creepy Pizza Hut guy, let's not meet ever again. I used to work at Pizza Hut when I was in high school. I have a lot of bizarre stories from working there, but this is the one that scared me the most. My Pizza Hut was the kind where you could only pick up the food, and there was also a wall between the storefront and the kitchen, so if you were in the front of the store, you were pretty much on your own. The store itself was located in a kind of out-of-the-way dead shopping center. Oh, and it was in Las Vegas. That should tell you a lot about the level of our clientele. For some reason, I always got stuck on late shift despite being in high school. So on most weekend nights by 10 at night, it was just me and one other cook in the store, always twiddling our thumbs. I would hang out at the front, and the cook usually was way in the back of the store, out of earshot. One night, I was hanging out beside the counter, and I saw this guy walk past. I didn't think much of it, and went back to doing nothing, while waiting for my shift to end. Then, the door to the store opened. I look up and realize it's the same guy who just went by. He's tall, but also skeletally thin, and there's something not right about his eyes. But despite him putting me on edge, I get up, greet him, and ask him what he'd like to order. Nothing. He just stands there in front of me, staring up at the ceiling, muttering to himself. I was only 17, and for the most part a good kid, despite living in Sin City. So, I didn't really know what to make of it. Now, I would probably chalk it up to drugs. Anyways, he is still standing there, vacant expression, and muttering to himself what sounds like tongues. Then, he abruptly spins around and just walks back out of the store, without even acknowledging that I exist. I'm unnerved, but I shake it off and sit back down. It's getting towards the end of my shift, and I'm counting down the minutes, when I realize somebody has walked back into the store. I look up, and it's the same guy. Same creepy eyes, only this time he is holding a phone to his ear. He's muttering unintelligently, so I realize he's not talking to anyone. And worse, he's staring right at me, super intense and unblinking. At this point, I was starting to get frightened. He keeps looking at me, and so I try to be polite and ask if I can help him. He starts walking towards the counter, still staring at me. Then suddenly he asks, in a perfectly normal voice, if his order is ready. I'm mentally going, what the fuck at this point, and not sure how to answer. So I go with the truth, and I tentatively point out to him that he didn't order anything when he was first in the store. He gets this bug-eyed look on his face and lunges towards the counter. I jump back at this point, and my heart is pounding because this guy is obviously not sane. I'm also afraid that he's going to pull a knife out or something and stab me. Then, just as abruptly as he lunged, he yells, "God damn it," looks super confused or upset, like he's about to cry, and puts his head in his hands and starts pulling at his hair. I start to feel slightly bad at this point, and I ask as nicely and calmly as I can if he maybe wants to order something now. His head snaps back up. His expression is now completely blank, and he looks totally deranged. I'm standing totally still because I'm afraid moving will set him off. Then thankfully the door to the store opens, and a huge man walks in. He looks at this guy, kind of confused, realizing that something's not right with him. The crazy guy looks at him, looks at me, then starts backing up until he's out of the door. He starts walking towards the edge of the store, looking at me the whole time, and then he goes past the edge of the store, and is gone. The guy who walked in looks at me and asks, "What the hell was that?" I look at him and go, "I have no idea, I think he was crazy." I try to shake it off, but I'm totally on edge for the rest of my shift. When I clock out that night, I made one of the drivers walk out with me. Then I jumped in my car and got out of there. I never saw that dude again, but it was a weird experience and pretty unnerving. I'm also not sure what he would have done if that guy hadn't walked in when he did. So creepy guy who thought he ordered pizza, let's not meet again.